Imagine stepping into a medieval convent, your senses immediately assaulted by an overwhelming wave of decay. The air is thick with the putrid essence of rotting garbage, spoiled food, and festering wounds. Yet this horrifying stench doesn't emanate from the convent's refuse piles. It comes from a kneeling figure at the altar, a princess, revered as a saint. The odor is so potent that nuns routinely faint, visitors are instantly overcome with nausea, and even bishops, shielding their noses with perfumed handkerchiefs, hastily retreat in disgust. This woman hasn't bathed in over 2 decades, her clothes remain unchanged, and her wounds, left untended, fester openly. Her stench, a pervasive cloud of putrefaction, is detectable from a staggering 50 meters away. This is the unsettling tale of Margaret of Hungary, a royal who transformed extreme self-neglect and filth into a profound form of religious devotion, finding a unique path to sainthood through her infamous odor. In the year 1250, Hungary was home to this truly extraordinary individual. Margaret, the daughter of the powerful King Bathe IV, possessed all the qualities that should have made her one of the most desirable women in medieval Europe: youth, wealth, intelligence, and impeccable royal lineage. However, she carried with her a monumental and inescapable problem: a truly dreadful smell. Reports suggested she reeked worse than an abandoned butcher shop baking under the summer sun. This wasn't mere folklore, it was a documented historical fact, corroborated by numerous eyewitness accounts and official church records. Those who encountered her described her odor as beyond words, capable of incapacitating even the most robust men and surpassing any known putrid substance. This was a genuine princess who deliberately embraced bodily decay as the highest expression of Christian piety. The genesis of this extreme devotion can be traced back to a period of grave crisis in Hungarian history. In 1242, the terrifying Mongol hordes, under the command of Batu Khan, unleashed systematic devastation across Eastern Europe, incinerating cities and massacring populations. Hungary's capital, Buda, was reduced to ashes, buried beneath mountains of corpses. King Bathe IV, facing utter despair, his armies decimated, his allies scattered, and his castles crumbling before the Mongol war machine, made a solemn vow to God. If Hungary was spared from complete annihilation, he pledged to dedicate his youngest daughter, Margaret, to a lifelong religious vocation. Miraculously, in 1243, the Mongols inexplicably retreated, acting on orders from Karakorum. Bela perceived this as direct divine intervention. God had saved Hungary, and now he was bound to fulfill his part of the promise. Thus, in 1244, Margaret, then a vibrant 20-year-old, was sent to the newly constructed Dominican convent on Rabbit Island in the Danube River. What began as an act of profound gratitude for her father's fulfilled vow soon transformed into a disturbing and radical spiritual odyssey. Margaret arrived at the convent much like any princess of her era, refined, educated, meticulously clean, and delicately perfumed. She adorned herself in vibrant silks, glistening gold jewelry, and her long hair was carefully styled. Yet the young woman was fiercely determined to prove to God, to her father, and to herself that her religious calling was truly genuine, not merely a consequence of her father's desperate pledge. She aspired to become a true saint, no matter the personal cost, and that cost would prove to be astronomically high. Her transformation was a gradual descent, akin to a creeping illness. Initially, Margaret renounced her princely attire, opting for the coarsest and most uncomfortable habits the convent could offer. Next, she ceased combing her hair, allowing it to become a tangled, matted mess. Following this, she abandoned all concern for her physical appearance, viewing mirrors as instruments of vanity. But the most extreme act was yet to come. In 1246, Margaret made a decision that would indelibly mark her life, death, and reputation for the next 8 centuries. She stopped bathing entirely forever. For 25 years, until her dying breath, not a single drop of water touched her body for the purpose of cleansing. In her increasingly distorted perception, bodily cleanliness symbolized sinful vanity and worldly pleasures that diverted the soul from pure divine contemplation. To achieve a mystical union with Christ, She believed she had to mortify her flesh in every conceivable way. And what better method to torture her body than to make it a source of absolute disgust? What ensued defies polite description. Margaret not only abstained from washing, but actively and systematically cultivated dirt and filth as extreme forms of penance. She wore the same clothes for months on end, allowing them to become utterly saturated with sweat, urine, occasional feces, and other bodily secretions. She deliberately allowed food to rot on her garments. When she vomited, which was a frequent occurrence due to her intentional consumption of spoiled food, she refused to clean it, allowing the putrid remains to accumulate in reeking layers on her body. The stench emanating from her became legendary throughout medieval Hungary. Brother Marcellus, the convent's confessor, meticulously documented her life for church records. In 1252, he wrote, "The odor emanating from the holy princess's body is so penetrating and repulsive that it can be clearly detected by any normal person at a distance of 50 complete paces. During liturgical celebrations, several sisters have completely fainted due to the unbearable intensity of the smell, and we are forced to keep all chapel windows open, even during the most rigorous and freezing winters." Imagine a human odor so intense it could traverse half a football field and still cause immediate fainting. The situation deteriorated with each passing year. During the brutal winter of 1248, Margaret developed open, bleeding wounds on her feet due to extreme cold and a complete lack of basic medical care. Instead of seeking treatment, she deliberately allowed the wounds to become severely infected. She believed that the pain and the putrid smell of these infections were divine gifts, bringing her closer to Christ's suffering. The yellowish pus, clotted blood, and rotting flesh created an unbearable stench that violently sickened people even before they saw her. Visitors described the experience as smelling death itself and feeling hell through their noses. The other nuns, initially admiring her extreme devotion, desperately implored her to wash, if only out of Christian mercy or basic human decency. Margaret adamantly refused, declaring it a direct satanic temptation. God, she believed, desired her to be dirty, stinking, and repugnant. Any suggestion of cleanliness, she maintained, was the devil's work, attempting to divert her from perfect holiness. The situation became so extreme that important visitors began avoiding the convent altogether. Hungarian nobles, who traditionally made generous donations, stayed away, claiming they could not endure the stench long enough to conduct business. The convent's finances suffered directly from the princess's infamous odor. Even the Bishop of Veszprém, investigating rumors of her extreme practices in 1251, recoiled upon meeting Margaret, covering his nose with a perfumed handkerchief and declaring he had never encountered such an offensive smell from a living human being in his entire ecclesiastical career. Yet Margaret had fervent defenders among influential Dominican theologians. They argued that her extreme stench was undeniable proof of her genuine sanctity, citing ancient saints who had similarly rejected bodily care. Pilgrims began traveling hundreds of kilometers specifically to smell the rotting princess, sincerely believing that her physical proximity granted special spiritual graces and indulgences. A thriving market even developed for pieces of her infected clothing sold as sacred relics. Filth had, quite literally, become a marketable object of religious veneration. In her final years, Margaret's body was a living testament to extreme neglect. Infected and oozing wounds covered nearly all her visible skin. Her hair had become a tangled, solidified mass of dirt, parasites, rotting food, and indefinable substances. Her clothes were putrid rags, literally fused to her skin like a second layer of filth. The smell had transcended any known human repugnance, entering realms beyond descriptive language. She died in January 1271 at the age of 46, officially from a prolonged fever. However, it was clear she had succumbed to pure, self-inflicted filth and extreme bodily neglect. Ironically, her corpse had to be thoroughly washed and purified before the official funeral, marking the first time in over 25 years her body was truly clean. Margaret was canonized in 1943, becoming Saint Margaret of Hungary, arguably the most putrid saint in the history of Christianity. She achieved her desired sainthood, became a legend, and is remembered 8 centuries later. But honestly, if you had met Margaret in life, could you have stayed near her for more than a few seconds without violently vomiting? Could you have truly venerated a saint whose smell caused people to faint from 50 meters away? The princess, who reeked worse than rotting garbage, forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Not all religious devotion is truly admirable or healthy. Sometimes, those officially called saints may have simply been very, very mentally ill individuals.